All right, I guess we'll get started. This is my first time doing this, so bear with me. Today we're going to go over invoicing procedures. There's a lot to do when you do invoices. It's not just pushing a button and generating something. And you all know that because you all play a part in helping to prepare the invoices by going over your billing reports and such and such. So the first thing is preparing the job assignment sheets. When the job assignment or when the NTP comes in, you should almost immediately do the job assignment sheet and send it to Amber so it can be put into a Jira. That way, if somebody has time to charge to it, they can go ahead and charge the time to it. They don't have to wait for it, wait days for it to be entered, possibly charging to another job, thinking that they're going to move it and then forgetting. So the sooner that we get the job assignment sheet and get it put into a Jira, the sooner everybody can make sure that they're charging to that job and not charging to overhead or to an incorrect job. And it really helps because sometimes it's not caught until the end of the month. Then we have to go back and we have to move time around. So it's just really important that we get that job assignment sheet, get it into a Jira. Make sure when you do your job assignment sheets that everything is filled out on the job assignment sheet and everything is correct, because that's the way that we're putting it into a Jira. If you put a wrong contact or something in there, wrong phone numbers, wrong email addresses, it makes our job more difficult in case we need to contact the client for any reason. If you don't want time charged to the job yet, but we need to get it in there, we can always put the job on work hold. And the same goes if your job is out of budget and you don't want anybody else charging any time to it, let us know. We can put it on work hold, and that way time doesn't get charged to it. Your job's going over budget, that sort of thing. You should be reviewing your timesheets from your staff at the end of the pay period, at least at the end of the pay period. You can always go in and check and make sure that they've charged things correctly. But don't wait until the billing report comes out. And then as you're going through that, you realize that these people charged to the wrong job. The sooner that we get it corrected, the better it is. It helps everybody out, helps us out, helps you out managing your job, budget wise. Make sure that that it's right from the get-go. If your job's going over budget, make sure you send extra work orders in if they're applicable. Send them in before the job goes over budget. Don't let your job go over budget and then have to deal with it later. Then we're holding time. More time's getting charged to it that shouldn't really be getting charged because we don't have an approval for the extra work order. So just make sure that you take care of that before the problem actually occurs. You should also make sure that your staff is entering their time and expenses on a daily basis. Again, that helps you to manage your budget because you know what's been billed or what's been charged to the job, instead of waiting at the end of the week or at the end of the whole pay period and then somebody just putting all this stuff in at one time. You can check your billing reports whenever you need to. And I think, Anthony, there's a better way for them to manage or to check their budgets and what's been charged and everything. Something with scheduling or something.
Yeah, Angie, I thought you were going to show them a billing report and kind of walk through what some of the sections mean and give them some tips on what they're actually supposed to look at and what the reports mean?
Yep, I have that in my stuff to do now. You want me to go over that now?
Yeah.
Okay, I just thought I'd throw some other stuff out there, but I can do that. Okay, hang on a second. Can you see that?
Yep.
Can you see the billing report?
Sure can.
Okay. Okay, so the billing report, everybody knows what they look like. When Amber and when we generate these billing reports for invoicing purposes, we're usually going through it. We're looking to make sure that everything on the WIP status is billable and that somehow something has not changed to hold or to defer or anything like that. So you should also be checking that. And that's right here. Just check and make sure that they're all billable. They should be, because we went over it, but you know, something can slip by us. Most jobs require the notes on their timesheets. So everybody should be putting notes on their timesheets. That's another thing that you should be reviewing. Make sure the notes actually apply to the job. Amber and I don't do that because we don't really know what's happening on the job. So, like, for example, Puskar says scope review. I have no idea what that is. So Radeep just has some periods in here just so he didn't have to put a note in. But just go through these and make sure that the notes that are on here actually apply to the job. If they don't apply to the job, you want to let me know so I can take them out or replace them with another note or something. These notes, even though the client doesn't see the billing report, these notes are on timesheets. So if the job were to get audited, we don't want these notes showing up. And if you don't tell me that they need to go away, I don't know that. Down at the very bottom is the status of your whole project. There's different phases that also have this, and you can look at those to see what phases are over budget, what phases are under budget. You can look at those. You can look at this. It tells you, you know, your entire contract amount, what's been spent, what's been billed, and so forth. Does anybody have any questions or want to make any comments on this? Okay. Another thing that I wanted to show you.
Angie, do you have any kind of common concerns that you have month to month with some of the information that you receive back? Maybe you could talk about some of those issues to perhaps resolve some of them.
So I guess, Angie, before you maybe do that, if everybody here could just get a appreciation for what Angie is doing for the office. Most people on here are engineers with projects, and they're managing, you know, maybe a dozen, half dozen projects. And they're responsible for that. And the associated client correspondence with all that. Whereas Angie is in charge of billing every single project in this office. So it's hundreds of projects and tasks. And she has every single project manager, every single department director, corresponding in the office on every single task that we're billing every month. She has to coordinate all of the billing reports, the invoices, the project reports for every single person that is charging time to a project. She takes that information, generates an invoice, and every single client has their own invoicing standards, their procedures, different formats. And then she sends the invoice to a client, and she's dealing with every single client, their own personal contact information, and coordinating with them on the submittals and the resubmittals and, change this, change that. Once that comes in, she's going back to the project managers to, move hours or change something. And she's doing that for every single project in this office. So take whatever workload and project requirements you may have for, your dozen projects, and then multiply it by 20. And that's what Angie's doing. So anything that we can do internally to help her be more efficient, effective is a bonus. And any delays that you have with billing reports or your progress reports, or, responding to a question that she has, only compounds her work involvement and, the amount of data that she needs to comprehend and keep up with. So that's just a quick overview of what Angie is doing, and what her requirements are. So this whole training is intended to be some type of nudge on maybe what you guys could be doing to help her better do her job. So with that being said, I'll change it over to Angie again, so you can maybe talk about some of the billing report stuff that they can do to help you do your job better.
Okay. Okay, sounds good. So billing reports, we usually print them around the 9th or the 10th of the month. They are due back to us by the 12th of the month. When you do the billing reports, you should also be updating your progress reports. Once I see that you've approved your billing report, I'm also assuming that you're updating your progress report. So if I'm assuming that, and I go ahead and I'm working on that invoice, I have it done, and then I notice something triggers and tells me that progress report hasn't been updated, then that's a setback. Then I have to contact you guys. I have to tell you, please update your progress report. Then I have to wait for that to come in when I could be finished that invoice already. Also, it's really important that I get the billing reports back by the 12th of the month. I know sometimes you might think, well, I've only got 3 or 4 jobs. So, it's not going to hurt if I don't get mine in, right on time. I just want to let you know, it does really hurt when you don't get them in, because those 3 or 4 jobs that you may have, they may be part of a larger invoice. For example, state highway jobs. We have state highway jobs. There's 20 tasks that I'm billing on that one state highway job. But if you're not getting your one task, your one billing report for a task that's involved, that's part of that one contract, I can't get that invoice done. So it doesn't matter if you have 15 tasks that you have to do billing reports and progress reports for, or you have 2 tasks that you may do. Holding up the billing reports is going to hold me up from doing my job, from doing my invoices. The invoices are, some people think that they're not really that important. Well, they are important, because if I can't get the invoices done and I can't get them to the client so that we can get paid, if Brutus isn't getting paid, then how is Brutus gonna pay us? So all billing reports are important. All tasks are important, no matter how big or how small, they're all important, and it should be a priority to get this information back to me on time. Another thing, when you're reviewing your billing report, you're approving it or you don't want to approve it. You want to hold it for the next month. So you put your little box up there that says hold. We need to know why that's being held. Are you just saying hold it because it's over budget? Are you saying hold it, we're waiting on an extra work order? Are we ever going to be able to bill that time? You know, those expenses, you know, whatever, that sort of thing. So we need to know why we need to hold that invoice. And if we're holding that invoice month after month after month, why? Why can't we bill that? Why are we still charging time to a job that we can't bill?
Does anybody have any questions on how to read or interpret the different sections of this report?
I guess so for MDOT projects where we just kind of, as project managers, at least we just put the percentage complete in the progress report, and I think, Angie takes care of the rest, but we should be using the last spent amount, so I guess that includes, sub-consultant money as well as the percentage completely input.
Yes, our general objective is to bill all of the WIP that's sitting on a project month to month. Lump sum projects or percent complete projects, there is a bit of flexibility, to go over or under a certain completion. If you're 30%, you submitted your 30% plans, you should be roughly around 30% spent on the project. But you could be slightly over or slightly under of that. And the objective here is to, build the maximum amount that we can, not kind of hold or defer, repeatedly hold or defer time. So yes, you should be looking at the percent completion. Some of the other issues that we have, they kind of come up regularly. Angie, can you scroll up to like a specific phase? Like a phase summary. Yeah, that one's fine.
Okay.
What is the name of this phase here?
This is final SDWRE.
All right, so we have water resources, site development, final plans. Some of the jobs are perhaps set up not as efficiently or effectively as they could be. This one doesn't actually look too bad, but there are other projects that there is no kind of correlation to the phase budgets and what is actually being charged. So part of your review should be to look at the charges to each of the phases and make sure that those are the appropriate placeholders for the time, not just looking at the whole thing, the whole project as a total. Quite often, if you actually take a look at some of the different projects, there's, like one phase will be significantly over budget, and then the next corresponding phase will be considerably under budget, and the whole thing is kind of tracking okay, but it's just not being looked at regularly to make that adjustment to make everything kind of track on the same line. So these are some of the things that could slightly improve the process and make it a little more efficient. When things like that occur,
Can I add to that?
Yeah.
It seems to be more of a problem when like the original job assignment sheet is set up You have water resource budget, you have structural budget, you have highway budget for each phase. That works. But let's say 8 months after the project submitted, there's an EWO number 2. And that comes its own phase. And then everybody continues to charge the highway budget, but EWO number 2, nobody charges because they don't know what that means. So tracking that and making sure, people are billing under the appropriate phase. If not, you don't want to track it like that, then just add those extra hours into the original phase. So it's, it actually means something. If that makes sense.
So I've been trying to keep up with that a little bit too recently. If I go into a job and I see that a phase is over budget, I've been putting that phase on work hold. Just so nobody charges to it anymore. But there are a lot of them that are over budget.
So basically, in a nutshell, if you aren't planning to track it by that phase and it means nothing to you as a project manager, don't make it a phase. Just build the hours into how you want to track it. It can be whatever you want, but make it so that you're actually looking at that phase and tracking it accordingly so it means something. Because there's plenty of projects where everybody just charges preliminary engineering for the entire job. And nobody goes to final design or semi-final. Nobody's charging that. So, those other phases don't mean anything in the grand scheme of tracking the project.
Anybody else have any questions here?
Okay, so I guess that now brings up job assignment sheets. And completing the job assignment sheets. Like I said, it's really super important to get those into us as soon as you can. Don't wait until after the billing period when your people have already charged to overhead or to a different job, with the intent to move it back. So let me see. So here's a blank job assignment sheet. Anthony, do you suggest I do a blank one, or you suggest I do one that's already, I review one that's already filled out?
Depends what you're gonna say. I don't, I don't know.
Well, I just wanted to go through, just completing it in general. That was kind of why I wanted to fill up or pick a blank one instead of one that was already done. So I'm assuming everybody knows where the job assignment sheets are kept. They're on the P drive, under the job folder, under JAS. They're all there. When the new job is created, there's a template for the job assignment sheet in there. That's what you're going to use. They look like this. You're going to put your project name in. Make sure your project name matches what the job actually is. And don't just call it don't just call it construction inspection. If it's, if it's a certain person who's working on that job, they can put the person's name after that, correct, Anthony?
Yeah,
Okay, just something that actually goes with the job. We can't have, I'm just using construction inspection as an example. We can't, have 10 different jobs called construction inspection. There has to be something that differentiates them between each other.
for the folks that, are a little more familiar with this, is there, I don't know, any issues or concerns or anything that you want to discuss?
So from my understanding, and I think we kind of went over this some time ago with Micah, but when you put the hours and the rate there, it seems like that's kind of just, a placeholder or something. I mean, what I usually do is I just, whatever the total amount is, I divide by the total hours and just put a rate there. But it doesn't seem like it. I guess it's in a JIRA, we'll see the hours, spent and available, but since, we have obviously a wide variety of rates, it, sometimes doesn't really reflect how the project ends up, but
It's
is that correct? Yeah.
Yes, it's more of an estimating tool or something to kind of gauge an average, track of the project, more so than like this project is going to be capped at so many hours. It's never going to be like that. So it's more of just an estimation based on the proposal that was submitted, is where that information comes from. And it's more for just estimating purposes.
And then I guess the top or one of the columns, I think you're supposed to put the overhead rate. So what I had been doing is just whatever, overhead rate was assigned plus the profit is what the percentage I put in there is. Is that correct?
It should be tied to in most cases, that's tied to whatever contractual rates that we have. So we have a mix of contracts that have our audited rate, contracts that we have a different kind of like proposed rate in the beginning of the contract that we're stuck with. So you should talk to the contract manager in those specific instances, because it does vary project to project.
Well, Anthony, whatever on this sheet, whatever we submit as a proposal, those should be the rates reflecting
Yeah.
here. Otherwise, it will not show up correctly in the system. I mean, if you have submitted as overhead rate of 180%, 180, and then your profit is 21%, you can fill out. If you select that column A, select one compensation method, it will pop up. Your
Yes,
overhead
that's
rate,
correct.
if you pull down, let's say time card, right? It will show you the overhead rate and your profit rate, which should exactly match the your price proposal that you submitted, which is approved.
Yes, that'll work on, most projects, state highway jobs, most of the county work. The only instances where that's not necessarily true are going to be contracts where we have kind of like low bid fixed hourly rates that we bill on a percentage basis. The rate wise, it might be a little low, but we should be actually scoping out the projects to obtain a certain fee to do the project. So if you take like a loaded rate and just, divide it by an actual rate, you can get your estimated factor. It'll usually be a little lower than what we're trying to achieve. By default, we should be doing at least 2.6, 2.7 on all jobs should be the multiplier. And then in, certain instances where we're kind of intending to not make a project financially successful, we'll go a little lower. to try to mitigate some of that. But by default, the expectation is about a 2.7 factor at a minimum on those types of jobs.
And one more thing, the project name, the number of characters in the project name, I think it's locked to some 21 letters or something like that. Is there a
Yep.
possibility to revise that? Can that be revised to increase the number of letters in the project name? Because some project names are a little longer, and if we have to exactly match what is shown on the proposal, wouldn't fit.
Well, my immediate question would be, is it necessary to call it something extremely long, or can we kind of condense that to something more reasonable?
Well, for the project names, we usually, go by the name that's given by the state. But here
Yeah.
we can abbreviate. We can abbreviate here, if that's okay. I mean that's how I usually do it here. But just in case, if you have to put in the entire name, I usually abbreviate if it doesn't fit.
Yeah, I don't see any. I mean, I guess we can extend that probably, but I mean, I would make an effort to just reduce the name of the project to something a little more reasonable.
Okay.
And just because state highway calls it something doesn't necessarily mean that we need to do exactly that same long over 21 character project name.
Okay.
I mean, the general idea, behind naming projects is to make it sort of extremely difficult to not know what that job is just by looking at the name. We have, and Angie kind of mentioned this before, but we got into a habit where we have several on-site people. So right now we have, and these are different district offices and whatnot, and there's like 5 jobs that are called on-site support. When you just have like a project list, it's extremely difficult to know exactly what those tasks are and what contracts they're associated with without digging into more information. So instances like that, we could do a little better on the naming. There are other projects that just have just a long name or something that's just unnecessary to put into, project name. You can always do a little better there.
So, Radit, you added a question. Can we add more rows to this? I guess my question is, so right now there's 15 rows for engineering services. Like how, at that point, if you're adding more than 15 phases to like a project, I would question that it would be too complicated, and maybe we're breaking out those phases too precisely, and it's impossible to track it if there's, more than 15.
Yeah, I mean, I think I have run into a few times on this one. They say, I mean, especially for big jobs, you have structures, highway, water resources. If it goes all the way to construction, you're looking at least 9 phases plus, construction phase. And let's say you have change orders that you want to put at separate phase. So then I have to create a separate job assignment sheet, transfer all the data into what I have now. So kind of like a little bit get cumbersome. I'm just saying, I don't know, this is all locked and has macros. Maybe if there is an option to put extra rows especially when it's a big job. I have a few jobs like that, and I had to give Angie like a separate job assignment sheet than we have. So sometimes it creates more work than it's needed. Maybe if there's a way to add more rows, that would be great.
Dean, I know there was one that was just like that. I can't remember which one it was, but I think I mean, I agree. I think that having two job assignment sheet, having a page 1 and a page 2. I don't think it goes very good. I don't know. I find it hard to follow it. So what I did was, I can't remember exactly what I did. Just say there was a phase A, and it had highway and water resources and structural underneath of it. And then there was a phase B that had the same thing under it. Like a couple of those phases were complete, or they were billed, they were billed out in a JIRA. There was no budget left in them. So like I combined those 3 lines, the highway, the water resources, the structure. I just called it phase A. And, I just did another job assignment sheet. I just called it phase A. And, I combined the hours and the rate. And I did that for, I think it was like 4 different phases. So I did that just to free up some space. But I put a note down in the comments that said something like, phases in a JIRA should still be broken out as per the original job assignment sheet, or something like that. I can't remember exactly what it was. But I did that just to make it easier to follow the job assignment sheet, so that there wasn't 2 pages.
Okay. Yeah, just a suggestion, maybe if you can create more rows, be easier. But if you
Yeah,
can't,
I mean, I kind of.
there is always a workaround.
I kind of think, the same thing like Billy was saying, that everybody's making all these rows, not saying you in particular, but everybody's making all these different phases, and then they're not managing those phases, those individual phases.
I'm gonna steal the screen share for a second here. I'll show you guys kind of what I'm talking about. And my screen up.
Yep.
All right, so I'm gonna pick on structures here. Don't take it personally. It's one of many. This just happened to be one. So this project here is called the City of Rockville Pedestrian Bridge. So it's set up here with all of these different phases. And task 1 structures has a $3,700 budget. And basically all of the time and all of the expenses and everything has been charged to task 1 only, which is why we have a $60,000 spent. Now, the project isn't actually over budget because we're not even kind of close there, but there is no kind of, specific interest being applied to this task versus this task versus this task, which is why you see all the time in here and then nothing in the subsequent phases. So, I mean, this is just one instance of a few where this has been broken out so much. And, the intent here was to sort of follow kind of like a invoice setup that the client had provided, but in reality that doesn't necessarily track the way that it was intended. So a very simple, looking at the job assignment sheet and stuff, or not the job assignment sheet, the monthly billing reports, and recognizing that this one phase is significantly over budget, and then making the necessary corrections to move those charges to the correct area, makes the whole project kind of track better. Why that's being brought up in an invoicing discussion is that makes Angie's job considerably more difficult to actually process something like that internally, because even though the job isn't over budget, our system kind of doesn't allow us to bill different phases over budget like that. So we have to sort of play with how that invoice gets internally processed. And it, over time, the more you do that, the more difficult it is. And it just ends up causing more problems than are really necessary, and the whole thing can be avoided. The flip side of that is perhaps this project could be set up slightly different, so it's a little less confusing, especially when you have very small budgets for just a few $1,000s. Is that necessary to call that out to have its own line item? Maybe not. It's maybe sort of up for debate, but I think I've made the point that I'm trying to get across. While I'm looking at this, we go back to kind of naming the projects. And this is more of a question, just because I saw this, but what is the difference between these 4 projects here? The Sidling Hill barrier. Does anybody know? Am I frozen?
I think-
I have no idea.
I don't think Habib is on here, but I think that's a product of Barry at District 6. When they issue an extra work order, they're weird with fund reallocation to it, and they assign it like a different, it's really specific to District 6.
All right, I mean,
the way Barry wants to do it.
Okay, I mean, in those instances, can we be a little more creative on how we name those projects so they're not all the same? Are there any differences there? If we continue to do it, we have multiple projects with the same name, and it becomes confusing on a bunch of different ways. Especially when we have projects that, hypothetically, if we're sending out plans or something for reproduction, and then somebody writes I-68 Sidling Hill to charge to it, is that 5A, 5B, 5C? It's just, we need to just kind of all come together and understand how one thing affects the other. Okay, any questions on any of that? Okay. And I got nothing else.
Oh, I do want to mention, when you're, I don't have anything to do with creating proposals or estimating proposals or any of that stuff. But I just want to make sure that everyone double checks and makes sure that when you do the proposals, you are billing the correct overhead rate. The overhead rate, sometimes, so there's an overhead rate for the office. And most of the contracts, it's the office rate plus FCCM. Some people, when they do their proposal, they're not adding that FCCM in if it's supposed to be. So for example, because I can't remember what the new overhead rates are. The old overhead rate was 180.11, I believe. Then there's a FCCM rate that's on that same line of our overhead rate letter. There was an FCCM rate of 0.21. So the correct overhead rate for the proposal should be 180.32%. But some people just use the 180.11. So that makes us not getting the the overhead rate, the full overhead rate that we should be getting. And also a lot of these new contracts, they are not allowing us to adjust that overhead rate. Not the overhead rate, the budget for the overhead rate. So if we have to do a fund reallocation and we're moving money from direct expense up to labor, we can't adjust that fixed fee. So if it's already being calculated at the wrong overhead rate,
Just make sure that there's a spreadsheet with all the SHA contracts where the overhead rates are applicable. Just make sure that you reference that when preparing proposals. And if
Yeah.
you have a question about it, please ask.
yeah, we just got new overhead rates like a week or two ago, right, Billy?
Yes.
That's all I have. Does anybody have any questions?
Hey, Angela, I have a quick question. Sometimes when we tell you to hold some billing, do you want us to go ahead and update the progress report, or should we hold it until it's ready for billing?
You can just hold till it's ready for billing.
Okay,
However, the objective is to bill the time, not hold it. So
Correct.
I understand that.
Anything else?
I have the overhead questions. I checked the other email. I think Billy gave the recent overhead rate is 150.47. Is that latest one?
I think the new overhead rate is
Yes, that's the newest one.
it?
Yeah, that is the new one, and there is a 154.98 in the same letter. Can you explain a little bit, Angie, what's the difference between these two?
Okay, hold on. So the current home office rate, including the FCCM, is 159.88%. And
That's
then
not what mentioned in the
That's
letter.
not in the letter.
So the letter states the home office rate is 159.65.
Yes, yes.
That is, but 99% of our contracts allow for the FCCM rate, so you have to add 0.23% to it,
To the 159.65?
to the
Yeah.
159 point, yes.
Okay,
Here-
that answers my question.
So
here's
right now we're using 159.67. I say 65, right?
No, you use 159.65 plus 0.23, which is 156.88. 156.88.
Okay.
159.88.
Right.
Okay.
Do you
Oh,
see
yeah, sorry,
the-
sorry, yeah, 159.88.
Okay.
Do you see the letter that I shared?
It's just
You are
showing
not
your.
sharing the letter.
It's just a blank screen.
So
Oh,
this
okay.
gonna apply to each every district.
Yeah,
'Cause I
the
got
only,
the-
the only contract that I'm aware of that doesn't apply to is the, MVA. It's just,
Mhm.
the MVA is just our, no, MAA,
Okay.
and
Right.
it's just the home office. You don't get to include the FCCM. And if you're ever confused, you can go to the, contract for the specific, task. And there's a whole section in there, and if and discussing the FCCM rate and whether it's allowable or not, but all of our SHA contracts allow it.
And the MAA has its own, we're still using an old rate for MAA, correct?
It's, yeah, the new one is still not, it should be soon, but yeah, it's still the last year's.
Okay.
Because I'm prepared the two proposal for District 6. So that's the 159.88. That's what we're going to use right now.
Yes.
Okay.
Anything else?
Can I put in a request? Angie,
Yeah,
or to Billy or Anthony? So the one thing that I have to say about, getting more into this is, Micah put in his notice, I'm getting more involved than before, is this jazz sheet. I find it very confusing. Part of it's easy because there's drop down. Okay, so that's easy, right? But then when you get down, you get to that part on the right. I find it very, very confusing. It sounds like from this meeting, other people find it a little bit confusing too. Is there like an instruction sheet, like how to fill that out, or if not, could one be created for people that are just starting to use the jazz? Thanks.
I have something. I'll send it to, I'll send what I have and I created myself. I'll send that to Billy and Anthony to look and see if they need to, add anything or elaborate on anything anymore. I'll send it to them and then we'll get something out to you.
That
Or
sounds
to
great. Thank
everybody.
you.
Anybody else? Okay, I guess that's it. It was a nice meeting with everybody. If you have any questions that didn't get answered, and I'm here, just let me know and I'll see if I can answer them for you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Ann.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Angie.